Welcome into Shot and Vipp, a podcast brought to you by Inside Carolina this college football season. I'm Taylor Vippolis. He's Jeff Schoettmer. We are Carolina football letterman breaking it down game by game. Before we get started today's shot, I have to remind everybody that we've moved our website at Inside Carolina. We're all part of the new site on the On3 network. It's the same staff, the same standard, just a new home on On3. You'll need to create a new account, and you can join now for just $1. Go to InsideCarolina.com to learn more. Shot Carolina loses 17-16 to Virginia in the South's oldest rivalry at Kenan Stadium. I was in attendance for it. A lightly attended game, but wound up being a pretty interesting game in terms of the overall outcome. But Carolina drops it. They fall to 2-5 on the season, 0-4 now in the ACC. Biggest takeaways from that game for you?
The number one takeaway before we get into our hard-hitting analysis is the MVPs of the game to me were those group of shirtless students that were off to the right of the student section, waving their T-shirts around over their heads, completely shirtless, going crazy. That was my favorite part of the whole day.
It's like a new trend now in college football. I believe it might have started at Oklahoma State.
Oklahoma State. I saw it a couple weeks ago. It
Yes.
started with one guy, and then 2, 3, 4 buddies go, and then you look up and there's 40 guys doing it.
So I respect that move because, like, if we're being honest, the fans haven't had too much to cheer about when it comes to Carolina football this year. And that section was almost like a bring your own juice to the game. Like, those people, every time they put them on the Jumbotron, every time they showed them anywhere inside the stadium, I'm assuming they put them on TV a good amount. Those people were the ones that were kind of fueling everybody else's energy. And it feels like it's a sweeping movement now in college football where it's like, hey, there's going to be a section of shirtless dudes, and one by one, more and more people are going to join them.
Yeah, it was a sight to see, because our fans, right, wrong, or indifferent, we sometimes get a bad rap of, not being as rowdy, not being as rambunctious and drunk and, obnoxious, you could say. But, I was proud of those guys. They kind of set the tone. And I think, regardless how the season's going, they were bringing the juice.
So my question for you is, if you're in Chapel Hill for that game and you see that section growing and growing, are you joining? And at what point are you joining? Because I'm watching it grow and I'm like, I wouldn't want to be within the first 5 people per se. But if all of a sudden you had over 200 people, maybe you do slip in.
Are you asking me if I would do it?
Yes.
If I was a college student, not on the football team, and just, a student that went to the school and I was at the game, I would, wherever I was in the stadium, I would walk over to the student section and join. But as 32-year-old Jeff Schoettmer attending the game, it depends on how long the tailgate was before,
It's tough because maybe your girlfriend's with you at the game, maybe your parents are with you, and it's like, hey, sorry, I just got to go pop the top right now.
Look, if it guaranteed a Carolina victory, I would do it regardless. I'm anything. I'll do anything to help the team win. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. And then, moving to the game, here's what I want to say. I want to give credit to Coach Belichick, for keeping his players focused over the last few weeks. Everyone knows we all follow, this team very closely. We've been in the spotlight nationwide. The Pablo Torre reporting, getting blown out by 3 Power 4 teams in our first 5 games, the potential news of Bill resigning, which, a reporter reported that was actually inaccurate. The turnover on the first driver's cow, after all that, keeping the team together and then obviously losing that game and then coming back and playing our best game of the season. So with all the negative things that have surrounded our team off the field, he has really galvanized and kept them together, and they've made progress. So, a couple of weeks ago, we were very down on Bill and the staff and the team and the direction of North Carolina, but call a spade, and I was very pleased to see. It was a good product we watched on Saturday. So, I think you and I have always been very objective in analyzing the Carolina football program. And when things are good, we give them praise. When things are bad, we call them out. And I need to give Bill credit. Bill and his staff have done a good job. Our team was prepared. They have gotten better over the past few weeks. And I'll say this, like the Bill Belichick happiness meter since he's been the head coach has been a roller coaster ride. So if you were to scale it out of 100, when he gets hired, I'm through the moon, over the moon, whatever that phrase is. And preseason, all the hype and all the attention we're getting off season, I'm super pumped about it, and everyone's optimistic going into the year. And then as the season's progressed, it's been very low at times. Almost down to, I would put it at a 10 out of 100. And now he's trending back up. So coaches always say you can't get too high or too low. Try to be even keel, and I think that's what we need to be as a fan base right now, because they are showing progress. And look, he's our head coach. He signed a 5-year deal. I think he's going to be here for a while. And I'm very happy with the progress we showed for the current guys on the roster. We can't go midseason and go get a new quarterback. We can't get a new OC. We have what we have during the season, and the guys have bought into the program. I mean, listen to their comments post game and in the press conferences. They speak highly of Bill, and they like the culture that he has, regardless of what national media or local reporters are reporting that, there's distress amongst the players and the staff. Like, you can only hear from the players post game and during their press conference, and they seem to enjoy playing for Bill. They like learning from him. They think he's brilliant. So, I'm that I kind of wanted to get my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, having Bill Belichick as your coach, if you're North Carolina, whether it's fair or unfair for the players on the team, it puts a target on this team's back. More people are naturally going to want to talk about the negatives that come with Bill Belichick coaching and the bad PR that can kind of come with it, with whether it's, his girlfriend, whether it's the buyout situation, whether it's how the coaching staff got assembled, Lombardi as their GM. More people are going to want to talk about that. More people are going to be drawn to that, because it's not as interesting to talk about a team that might be improving. It's not as interesting to talk about a team that could be potentially a couple of players away from competing. And I think what you saw in the Cal game and what you saw in the Virginia game is a team that is trending in the right direction, a team that has been in the game more often than they haven't been in the game. For me, where I'm kind of stuck evaluating this team, you mentioned the quarterback position. And for me personally, it's hard to evaluate where exactly this North Carolina team is as a whole, just because of how badly they missed at their quarterback evaluation, where I think there's a lot of things we could debate about. We could debate about the overtime going for it or not. The bottom line in that Virginia game for me felt like if Carolina even got average quarterback play, that's a game that they win handily. And we're talking about a top 25 Virginia team where it's like they came in, I think they were a 10.5 point favorite. And you're watching those two teams play and you're like, Carolina belongs on the same field. Not only do they belong, Carolina should probably be the team that wins this game, but you're so handcuffed at the quarterback position where it's like, now we're just trying to make this game as ugly as possible and drag ourselves across the finish line.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. We definitely outplayed Virginia in all three phases. I thought we coached a better game than them. We don't have it at the quarterback position. And this isn't a bash Gio Lopez podcast, but it will be very telling in the offseason about how we go attack a quarterback in the transfer portal, or, decide to roll with one of these freshmen next year. It'll be very telling of what the coaching staff thinks, right after the season. Because, I said it in a few podcasts ago, I don't think the winning answer for our team in the next few years is the combination of Gio Lopez and Freddie Kitchens. I just don't think that that's, an adequate combination to be, competing for ACC championships. So the thing about Gio is he shows flashes of pretty decent play, and then, he makes boneheaded decisions. The number one being the interception he threw in the red zone. You
Yeah.
know, our defense has bowed their neck all day, and we get down to the red zone, and it's 3rd and 6, and we look if we don't complete a pass or we don't get another yard right there, we kick a 29-yard field goal, which is an automatic, and we go up 13-10. But you just cannot turn the ball over in the red zone as a starting ACC quarterback and expect to win games. What we did a lot in this game offensively that we haven't done as much in the past is we got into the empty formation, which is all 5 eligible receivers outside the tackle boxes, and no one's in the backfield, so it's just the lone quarterback back there. Why I think they did that is because I don't think they know that Gio doesn't process defenses very well and very quickly. And once you get an empty, it essentially forces the defense to show their hand, whether they're going to blitz, whether they're going to play coverage, whether they're going to play 3 down, 4 down, because it's hard to disguise an empty because, the offense is spread out. And I think he has trouble seeing over the line and over tight ends and, that kind of stuff. So, I did think that we did some things to try to help him there. But again, he was just inconsistent. He threw a couple really good balls, and then, he would be lazy with his feet, lazy with his footwork in the pocket. He had clean pockets a few times, and he ran himself into sacks or, didn't sit in there and take his time. So he's got happy feet a little bit. And the other thing to me that's interesting is going into the season, I thought he was going to be pretty dynamic with his legs, and he really is not at all.
No.
He doesn't show any bursts. He doesn't have any wiggle really. He's not that much better of a runner than Max Johnson. So, he's probably going to be the starter going forward, and we're going to live with it. But he cannot turn over the ball like that if he's not going to produce high explosive plays. Like, he doesn't throw the ball down the field very well. So if you're a quarterback that can't put up chunk plays and explosiveness, then you got to be very, very protective of the football. And, that just wasn't the case. So all in all, again, this isn't a Bass Gio Lopez podcast, but I didn't think he played very well. I thought he missed some reads. His numbers don't look terrible, but if you watch the game film, like, he's missing some reads where guys are open and he should be delivering him the ball.
Yeah. Largely he was pretty inconsistent in that game, but I think even when he showed flashes, unfortunately for him, his receivers didn't help him out a ton, where Carolina, for the 2nd consecutive week, fumbles on the 1-yard line. That's a 7-point swing there. When Carolina can try to get a field goal to end regulation, he takes a chance with a big play. The receiver drops the ball. It gets intercepted. So on the box score, that's going to show up as a interception for Gio Lopez. But for the most part, he put the ball where he had to. Receiver just didn't make a play and help him out in that situation. So I think, one, yes, it's been pretty disappointing to see where Gio Lopez is at because of what he was billed as during the offseason as this dual threat quarterback coming up from the G5 level. But to be fair to him also, he has made a couple of plays that should have gone his way that haven't gone his way. And maybe if a couple of those plays go his way, we're talking about it differently. But for the most part, when you're watching him on film, there is a lot to be desired, especially when you're seeing some of the reported price tags for quarterbacks. And when you're spending that much on your quarterback, it probably should be somebody who can be a game changer for you. And he really hasn't shown that. But Shot, from the start of the season to where we're at now, who are some of the players that are maybe catching your eye that are producing that we didn't really see maybe flashing in the beginning of the season, or maybe they weren't just really getting an opportunity in the beginning of the season?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting topic to me because I've, been in the college ranks as a coach. So I've, been part of practice where you have younger guys or guys that don't start the season, and you're actively getting them reps in practice to try to progress and develop and stuff. And sometimes it doesn't come to fruition where these guys, we're getting them reps in practice, but they don't produce in the game. And I want to give, again, credit to our coaching staff for kind of changing up who's playing more. And like Greg Smith, for example, I don't know why he wasn't playing very early in the season. Maybe he wasn't ready. Maybe he couldn't pick up the defense. But we have stuck with him and brought him along in practice, and he's making plays in our secondary now. Tyler Thompson was a guy that did not play a lot in the first few games, and he's really flashed in the last two. Madrid Tucker, he was on what UNC calls like their practice squad or their developmental squad, not even dressing for the games. And, he has a few catches in this game. Melcart's obviously played, but he has a breakout 3-sack game. Kobe Paysauer, he's the most interesting one to me because he produced back when Drake May was the quarterback. 2022, 2023, he had, I think, 7 touchdowns between those 2 seasons and, 300 to 400 yards apiece. And, he was nowhere to be found early in the season. And then over the last 2 games, he's been in there and averaged 75 yards a game over the last 2. So, we're doing the things right in practice without going to practice and physically watching what we're doing. But that's showing me that we are practicing hard, practicing the right things, developing the guys that aren't even the starters. So that, to me, as a former coach, that's great to see. And it tells me they're practicing hard. I would love to see the PFF numbers of our missed tackles this game because I thought it was the best we tackled all year from all positions on the defense. I think our secondary and our linebackers are getting in better position to make the tackles. Look, there's still going to be missed tackles, but I think I counted 4 to 5 missed tackles, which is really good mid-season versus a top 20 opponent. Virginia's got athletes. Florida State's got athletes, and Virginia put up 40-something against them. So I'm very pleased. I'm very optimistic about the defense, and we can go into the defense next and really talk about their play. But it is exciting for me to see guys that did not start the season playing a bunch get snaps and produce.
Offense, I think it's as simple as right now for this Carolina team, you have Kobe Paysor, you have Jordan Shipp. Find ways to get them the ball as much as possible. Those are the 2 guys that feel like they're the playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. A lot of times with coaching, it is easy to complicate things and make things a lot harder than they could be. But for Carolina and how you kind of have to break this offense down, it could be as simple as like, hey, let's find ways to get Shipp and Kobe Paysor the ball, get them the ball early and often in a game. And especially if you could get them a couple quick passes, maybe that builds Gio Lopez's confidence to then maybe take the top off the defense and take some shots deep. And then I have Pro Football Focus numbers for the defensive players. The top defensive player for Carolina that played over 20 snaps, Tyler Thompson. Tyler Thompson graded out as a 90.2. Andrew Simpson at
he had a good game.
Andrew Simpson at a 78.2. Bayor at a 74.5. Abujade at a 73.2. And then Greg Smith was a 72.2. So that rounds out your top 5 on defense, passing the eye test. They did have 10 missed tackles. Some of those came from 2 came from Marcus Allen, 2 came from Andrew Simpson, and then a few. Nobody else had 2, so they were kind of spread out the remaining.
That's still a good number. I think that's a good number. And what I saw from my eye test was when we would miss a tackle, we would miss it in the right direction, and the next guy that was chasing the ball would knock them down, right away. It wasn't like they were gaining an extra 10, 20, 15 yards on those missed tackles. So that's good to see.
What else have you liked about this defense? Because if you're doing the glass half full for Carolina, the glass half full feels like you have a defense that's keeping you in games. And we said it in the TCU game that the defense is probably a lot better than what that final score indicates. And the past couple of weeks have kind of verified that and kind of confirmed that the defense is at least moving in the right direction and a defense that is competitive.
I'll start with a negative. The one play that really disappointed me was Virginia's first touchdown in the first half. I think they throw a little out route. Marcus Allen is on the receiver and he misses a tackle, and we're in zone coverage and House is chasing the ball, but he assumes that Marcus is going to make the tackle and he loafs on the play. And, he could have been there to clean up Marcus's, missed tackle, and he's loafing to the ball, and then Virginia scampers into the end zone, 10 yards untouched after that missed tackle. So that's definitely a learning experience from him. As an undersized linebacker, you got to play hard. And, I know he's a talented kid, but that one play is definitely rerun on Sundays by the coaching staff and definitely in the defensive meeting and the team meeting, and they're pointing that out because that's unacceptable. I mean, especially in the red zone, you can't assume anything, and you got to run the ball until the ball carries down. So start with the negative, but I was very, very proud of our defense this game. The thing I was most pleased with, and I'm gonna talk for a while on this. So we have not been, as a defense, very good at situational execution. Third downs, fourth downs, red zones right before the half, 2-minute drives into the game situations. And a huge drive to me was, right before the half, we've been awful, and we forced a 3 and out and get the ball back and potentially let our offense on the field to go kick a field goal. So I thought that was great because I remember in the UCF game, the TCU game, they score right before the half, and it kind of deflates our team. So we had more aggressive play calls on that defensive drive. Another one was on the same drive that Marcus Allen gets the PI call after he gets an interception. That could be a deflating moment for our defense, but they bowed their necks and ended up getting a goal line stand and, kept Virginia off the board. Didn't allow a field goal or a touchdown, obviously. So our defense kind of rallied after that. I mean, Virginia got the ball down to the 2-yard line, and we were able to hold them there. And then again, at the end of the game, Virginia gets the ball back with 3 minutes to go. Obviously, they got to drive the length of the field, but we stop them. We get a big sack by Melcart on that drive, and so that's 3 instances during the game where they really bowed their neck and stood up and gave our team a chance to win. And then throw in Andrew Simpson's interception. Virginia gets the ball midfield, and the first play he picks it off. So that's 4 instances where our defense had really stepped up when their kind of backs were against the wall. So give them a bunch of credit. The things that I noticed from our defense were, it starts with the D-line. They played their best game of the season in the run game and in the pass game. We were very strong and sturdy in our run fits and, knocking the Virginia offensive line back and recreating a line of scrimmage. Their technique was great. They were playing with low pads, and then when Virginia, threw the ball, we were winning one-on-one pass rushes, which I haven't seen a bunch of all year. Most of our sacks have been coming from blitzes and off-the-ball linebackers, but we had 1 sack on a three-man rush from our nose guard who just whooped the center. Melcart had a few. It wasn't like we were getting sacks on blitzes and pressures and exotic schemes. It was just 4-man, 3-man pass rush with not even really any twist or games called. It was just, good technique, swim moves and spins and good handwork. So, I've definitely seen some progress from our D-line. And, as a former defensive guy, seeing a D-line get after an offensive line is the best thing a defensive player or a coach wants to see, just because it completely messes up the opponent's offense. And the other thing was, I just thought we were in the right places. When Virginia motions and shifted, it never looked like we were out of place. We were lined up correctly. We were communicating. If Virginia, threw a bunch or a stack or a motion or a, unbalanced situation, we handled everything that they threw at us. And we looked like we belonged. We mixed up some zone coverage and some man coverage. We mostly on 3rd and long, we were playing some man and getting aggressive and pressuring the outside receivers. And then we would, drop in zone a few times. So our Steve Belichick did a good job of mixing it up, and I thought he called a really good game. So that's kind of what I've seen from, and especially because we're out without our best cornerback.
Yeah.
And so we're throwing guys in there that, Marcus Allen is playing some nickel on passing situations. He's moving inside and outside. We're playing more guys. The Minnesota safety's playing a little bit. Hardy's been really consistent all season. Gibson's playing solid, and then obviously we mentioned Greg Smith. So we're getting some good play out of those guys, and some of the younger corners that are getting opportunities are making plays. So we're playing more guys on defense, but again, it starts with the D line, and I was very proud of their progression and their growth.
We don't have to spend too much time on it. But what was your thought when Carolina scores in overtime, the decision to go for two or not? Because for me, at least, it felt like splitting hairs whether to go for it in that spot or not. And it kind of just comes down to a personal preference, what you thought would be best in that situation.
Yeah, I thought it was the right decision to go for it. And my whole philosophy is our offense is not good at putting the ball in the end zone and scoring. So when you have 2 yards to win the game or 3 yards to win the game, you might as well go for it. What I didn't like was the play call and the whole operation of how it went down. So I'll take you back to Virginia's drive in overtime. So they get the ball down to the 2-yard line. It's 2nd and goal on the 2. And what does Virginia do? They use some creativity and some trickery to call their best play to ensure that they get a touchdown. Okay, so what they did was they put 6 offensive linemen in the game. They shifted to an unbalanced look. They essentially hid the quarterback, shifted over, and the running back took a direct snap. So there was some creativity and trickery into them ensuring that they scored on that drive. And then what we did was, we got 3 yards, right? We align in a condensed set and we try to hide the play call that we did. But what we were expecting in that situation was Virginia to run man. We essentially ran it's like a running back traffic hide play where it's really good against man coverage and it's awful against zone coverage. What I didn't like was when we motioned the receiver to 3-by-1, the defense they showed that they were in zone because a single defensive player did not run with the motion. So everyone in the stadium and the coaching staff knew they were in zone. So at that point, burn your timeout. Your play call, you have a timeout in overtime. Burn your timeout because you know that this play call that you ran on offense is not going to work versus this zone coverage. If you were in man, run it. So that's kind of what I see when I went back and watched the tape is like, that's not a good play call against what they were in. And we got them to show their cards because we motioned and they showed that they were in zone. So, you always want to be, the upper hand and we had time to call a timeout and we did not. So, again, we were inches away, but I do like the aggressive nature of going for it. I'm a big Dan Campbell guy and he's always going for it in that situation. So, I think that's the right move. You play to win the game and look, as a player on the team and an offensive guy, you want to go win the game. You don't want to kick the extra point and play another overtime because the overtime rules in college get funky after the 2nd, 3rd, 4th overtime, And so I did like the play call. I didn't like the execution of us knowing that they were in zone and not doing anything about it.
Yeah, so if I'm just playing devil's advocate there, I think the reasons you don't go for it is because if you're up against a Clemson, if you're up against an Alabama, a Georgia, sure, you're trying to steal the game. For the most part, for the entire game, Carolina looked like they not only belonged with Virginia, but that they could actually beat Virginia. So you're playing well. Your defense is playing well in particular. Extend the game, keep it going. And then the second point, kind of like you mentioned, you didn't like the play call once you saw it was zone. If I'm North Carolina this season, and a North Carolina fan this season, it kind of comes down to I don't really trust my quarterback to make a play when we really, really need him to make that play. And I don't really trust my offensive play caller to put my quarterback in the best potential spot. So with those two things kind of working against you, maybe you do kick the extra point. But again, it's really splitting hairs because then you start the second overtime with the ball. If you kick that extra point, and in the second overtime, you have to go for two no matter what. But then maybe your defense can get a stop.
I don't think Freddie Kitchens has enough 2-point plays in his arsenal. Like that was his best 2-point play call, and we threw it out there in the first overtime, and it wasn't successful. And The longer we play in overtime, the less 2-point plays we have, the less confidence I have in our offensive coaching staff. So, I that was kind of my take on it.
Belichick is looking at Kitchens and like, hey, what you got in your 2-point bag? And Kitchens is like, he's looking and he's like, I don't got much.
It's empty. Yeah, it's empty.
Well, let's take a quick break here so I can remind everybody about our friends over at Johnny T-Shirt. If you're going to be in Chapel Hill, you can visit Johnny T-Shirt on Franklin Street. And if not, no worries. You can go online to johnnytshirt.com. They have everything that the Carolina fan could possibly want. The hats, the T-shirts, the jerseys, you name it. They've got it. Great people, great customer service. And don't forget, Inside Carolina premium subscribers save 10% off their orders. All right, Shot, Carolina, short week this week against Syracuse, playing on Halloween. What are your predictions, I guess, looking forward, big picture, rest of the season? Anything that maybe has changed since the beginning?
Yeah, my bold prediction for the rest of the season is we win 3 out of the last 5. I was very down on the team early, and they could be sucking me back in, and they could, Friday we could, lose a heartbreaker again. But I truly think we're going to beat Stanford, Syracuse, and State. I think, or potentially Wake. One of those two. I think Duke's more talented than us, but I do like how our team's trending. I think our guys are getting better, like I said, but they're emotionally stable, and they haven't let the outside noise defeat them this season. I think they're going to continue to play hard. I think our coaching staff is going to, particularly on the defensive side of the ball and special teams, or they're going to coach well and get a few victories out of our team. So that's my bold prediction. I think we win 3 out of 5, and I think we finish season 5-7.
You see it in the NFL a lot when teams go on short weeks and how it can kind of be funky and make a game maybe a little uglier than you're used to. How do you think the short week impacts the players on this team, and how did short weeks impact you when you were playing?
So we had short week earlier this season when obviously we played TCU to open, and we play them on a Monday night, and then we come back and play Charlotte on a Saturday. So we've done this once before in the season, and I think no one's better at it than Coach Belichick, because he's been doing it for years in the NFL. So he's accustomed to how they need to practice during the week. Maybe do lighter practices, not as many physical reps and more mental reps, more walkthroughs, more film, etc. So I think it bodes well for us because we've done it once before. And then speaking on it as a player, I actually love short weeks. Your body doesn't get enough time to recover, but to me, there's less in the game plan, and it's more about, it's mental reps during the week, which I love. And you're really just locking in on film that week and, doing everything you can to get your body back to 100% or as close to 100% as you can. And it's, the game plans are simplified, and it's just about going to execute. But, once the opening kickoff occurs, like all that goes out the window. No one's really focused on it. Once the ball's kicked off, no one cares that you had, one less day of rest. So I think we'll be ready to go. And I don't think there'll be a hangover from these last 2 losses. I think we'll even play better than we have, because now I think we have some confidence, regardless of the outcome of the game. I think our guys are playing with more confidence, and they are seeing their hard work pay off, and they're playing tighter games, they're playing more competitive games, and what they're doing in practice is translating to the game. So I think are we favored for Syracuse?
I believe Carolina is a 2-point underdog.
I'm taking Heels money line. I'm taking it.
Let me confirm that for sure. North Carolina, Syracuse. But one thing that I was going to say when it's loading is I've seen some fans wanting to move away from Belichick, some fans wanting to move away from Lombardi. I think that's a lot more realistic of a possibility at this point, that Carolina is looking for a new GM, and that's not with any insider information. That's just coming from the perspective. Carolina has never been a school that can just eat a $30 million buyout. and the results on the field the past couple of weeks have been a lot better. And I don't really, outside of like if every game looked like the UCF game, okay, then maybe that becomes more of a conversation. Where I think Carolina could get into trouble is some of the off-field stuff, and if that stuff kind of becomes a distraction. But the biggest difference I would say from last year to this year is you look at last year, the job openings that people thought would come open. Carolina was really the top job in the cycle, and why there were so many interested prospects in that opening job. You look at the college football landscape now, Carolina at the end of this cycle would maybe be like the 10th or 11th best opening. And I think we've kind of seen it in college football. I'm not sure there's 10 or 11 great college football coaches now, let alone 10 or 11 to go get from other schools. So then it's like it just becomes a crapshoot, and you're restarting the cycle. But luckily, that preamble bought me enough time for this website to load. Syracuse is a 2.5 point favorite on FanDuel. Carolina plus 110 on the money line.
That's decent odds. I love it. I love it. And now back to your point on the coaching cycle. Obviously we can't compete with Florida, LSU, Penn State, et cetera.
That Auburn job might open.
Yeah. What kind of screws college football fans' mentalities is you see, Kenny Dillingham go to a school like Arizona State and be massively successful in year one. You see a guy like Kurt Cignetti go to Indiana and be very successful in his first 2 years. So you're like, why can't we do it in our first year? There's tons of first year coaches that are struggling and they don't get it going until their second, third, fourth year. But so that those are my 2 cents on that. I do think that we're going to stick with Bill. I think we're going to right the ship a little bit towards the end of the year. We've already shown progress. Our main takeaway from the opening podcast we did this year was we really don't care what our record is this year as long as we see our team getting better and progressing as the season goes along. The other thing that's interesting to me is the recruits that we have incoming. They are very loyal to this staff and they are supporting them publicly. And, we do have a good recruiting class coming in. So I think those guys are excited to play for Bill. And, we haven't had many guys jump ship. I think most of them, 90+% are still committed to us. So they see our team getting better, but they also see that they can play right away. So, obviously our roster is going to be filled out with more transfers too, plus this incoming, class. But, I'm bullish on North Carolina right now.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I would really want to see from the Lombardi-Belichick combination is, well, now they've condensed the transfer portal into one window, but they were so late getting in on that first window where a majority of the playmakers and difference makers are going to be. They were so late that they were just filling out a roster. I heard reports that they were overpaying for guys that they were taking to just fill out that roster. And that's kind of the product you saw in the field the first couple of weeks of the season, where it's like you have the highest paid GM in college football. There doesn't really look like there's too many pros out there. Where's that disconnect coming from? So if there is one transfer portal window, this upcoming window, you would like to see North Carolina be more proactive and getting some of the higher end guys. They were in some of those conversations for some of the higher end guys who just wound up picking other schools, where it's like, if Carolina does get Fernando Mendoza, how much better do they look? If John Mateer comes to Carolina, how much better does Carolina look, especially with the way the defense has been playing the past couple of weeks? But yeah, for this team, it's really going to come down to the success of that transfer portal and how well Carolina is able to identify talent. But Carolina at Syracuse this Friday, a Halloween kickoff, 7:30 p.m. on ESPN. Shotman, we will be back next week to break it all down. Appreciate everybody watching and listening as always.